Greetings historians, welcome to Lore of the Dragon. This is a request I've gotten a bit in recent videos, but finally it has come. For every challenge that rose within the realms and abroad, not many have been able to stand firm and face the danger head on. Until the day a dragon of purple and gold was born, the proud species of the dragons. While this individual started his adventure because of something that was far outside his control, his actions would result in a quest that possibly you yourself have been on. From the lands of the Dragon Realms, to the Valley of Avalar, and the whimsical place known as the Skylands. And eventually, when everything in the past has been covered, we can look to the future and see what might lie ahead. This will be a 4-part series, exploring the story, legacy, and the possible future of Spyro the Dragon. Now to start, we'll be actually looking at a report by the Dragon News Network, a group that both can be heard at the beginning and ending of Spyro 1, filming and interviewing various dragons from Dark Hollow and Spyro himself in Stone Hill. However, they don't just play into the story through the first game, but also through a rather interesting interview by Sparks on the DNN. This was actually found in an old page which I only found thanks to the Spyro fan wiki. This interview, for the most part, covers Sparks' side of Spyro's adventures, and for a brief paragraph, Sparks actually talks about when he and Spyro first met, and subsequently when their friendship started. Where this took place can be assumed to be the land of artisans, given the art pieces depicting Spyro, with whom are dubbed Spyro's artisan dads, dragons that, while during Spyro's first adventures, or even after the first game, would teach Spyro their profession, to see if he would be interested in doing any one of them. Either that be sculpting, painting, or any number of things that they did. An exact location, however, is hard to find. But both the ending cutscenes, according to the Spyro fan wiki, from Spyro 1 and Spyro 3, have led them to believe that Spyro might have been from the land of Stone Hill. Personally, I believe while this could very well be false, it's the closest thing that we have to an exact location. And Stone Hill has been shown all throughout the original Spyro trilogy, so perhaps there is some importance about Stone Hill. That, or it was a nice location to set up a cutscene outside of Dark Hollow when it was daytime, ironically. Anyhow, according to the interview, Spyro and Sparks have been together ever since before Spyro actually hatched, and Sparks was nothing but a larvae. During this time, which was more than likely during a celebration known as the Year of the Dragon, something held every 12 years to celebrate hatching dragons, Spyro and Sparks would talk through the shell of the dragon egg, Sparks letting Spyro know what lied beyond its walls, as he crawled around its surface. Of course, eventually, Spyro would make it out of his egg, and because there isn't much covering this part of Spyro's life, there has to be some theory craft made based off of what has been observed of him and how dragons interact with him in the games, as the dragons would be more or less the most direct way to figure out who Spyro was before we saw him in Spyro 1. Now for the theories. After Spyro hatched, both him and Sparks would of course grow throughout the years, and the duo would travel through the various lands of the Dragon Realms, which at the time when Spyro started adventuring, there might have only really been 5 realms, known as Artisans, Peacemakers, Magic Crafters, Beastmakers, and Dreamweavers, with the 6th more than likely serving as a junkyard for the dragons, or maybe even later on in Spyro's early years, this would become a prison for a creature that had been hostile toward the dragons, one who had caused trouble in the past, Gnasty Gnorc. Either way, Spyro would travel through the realms of the dragons, learning the basics of gliding, possibly breathing fire, and using his horns to charge through anything in his path. Now, to start with Spyro 1, right where the adventure began. Once again, we'd be seeing through the perspective of the DNN, as they interviewed a dragon elder named Aster in Dark Hollow. The old dragon described the prosperous time the Dragon Realms found themselves in. However, Aster would have trouble recounting certain details about the realms themselves. It would be when he was posed with a question about Gnasty Gnorc that another artisan dragon named Lindar would come to give the answer the DNN sought. Unknown to the dragon, however, as the DNN broadcast went out, it made its way to Gnasty Gnorc, and after only a few moments, Lindar mentioned less than desirable traits that he attributed to Gnasty Gnorc. In retaliation and a fit of rage, Gnasty Gnorc would use his magic to freeze Lindar and the rest of the dragons as crystal statues. A young Spyro chased sheep in the background, playing as the adults went along with the interview, but when the dragons returned into the statues, the DNN focused on Spyro as he watched green magic fall upon the mythical creatures. But instead of running, something Gnasty might have assumed given the small size of the purple dragon at the time, Spyro gleefully exclaimed that he had something to do, and so started his adventure to save the dragons from Gnasty Gnorc's magic. Assumingly, once again, Spyro would travel through the Dragon Realms, with Sparx by his side. During the vacancy of the Elders, 12 eggs belonging to the dragons had been stolen by thieves hired by Gnasty, leaving Spyro the responsibility to not only save the older generation of dragons, but the new as well. Thousands of gems would also be stolen by the Gnorc, some of which he had turned into his own army. But as Spyro swiftly moved through the Dragon Realms, he would reclaim the stolen gems and reclaim the stolen dragon eggs. As he traveled through the Dragon Realms, he would of course meet many elders of all kinds, including some that apparently hadn't seen the young dragon for a good while, and even those who had met him before the game had even started. While some would have little to say, some would give tips to the young dragon, and some would congratulate Spyro on his accomplishments, and how far he had gotten as a dragon. One in particular is rather interesting to note. While in the land of peacekeepers, a dragon named Gnarc said something about Spyro fulfilling some sort of destiny, only to have Spyro respond with something that, if finished, more than likely would have been an expletive. And so, Gnarc just told Spyro to collect the treasure and beat back the Gnorcs. Now, throughout each realm, there was an elite minion under the command of Gnasty Gnorc. Artisans would be guarded by Toasty, a sheep that masked himself within a giant scarecrow. Next would be a Gnorc called Dr. Shemp and Peacekeepers. In Magic Crafters, it would be a wizard known as Blowhard, and was a creation of Gnasty along with the rest of Gnasty's army. Beastmakers would be guarded by another one of Gnasty's creations, a robot named Metalhead, which if viewed from the back, I think might be powered by nuclear energy along with the metal poles you have to destroy to defeat Metalhead. Finally, there would be Jack, a jack-in-the-box that would throw presents, or as one dragon put it, boxes at Spyro. And when he traveled the Gnasty Nexus, he would find that dragons he had already saved from across the realms were frozen, trying to get to Gnasty Gnorc. While they didn't want to admit it, they were trying to reach and defeat Gnasty themselves, but failed in their attempt, having been saved by Spyro once again. For whatever reason they tried to defeat Gnasty themselves isn't ever stated, but it could be a multitude of things. But whatever the reasons were, they might not ever be known and can only be speculated upon, unless for some reason they are brought up in the future. Though the main reasons I could think of is that they didn't want to be shown up by a pretty much 11-year-old dragon, or they just didn't want to have a kid try to fight an arch nemesis. Eventually though, Spyro would meet Gnasty Gnorc face to face, and instead of fighting the young dragon head on, Gnasty would choose to run, trying to escape from who he now saw as a threat. Though despite his attempted escape, Gnasty would finally fall to the purple dragon, as he now found himself backed against a wall, and with the Gnorc being defeated, Spyro was able to move on and take back everything Gnasty stole from the dragons, allowing the young dragon and dragonfly to get some much needed rest, at a popular vacation spot that would actually be mentioned in Spyro 2. At some point later that year, Spyro and Sparx would find themselves in Stone Hill once again, looking up to a rainy sky. Spyro turned to Sparx, questioning if this weather would ever change, bringing him to say the statement that he had forgotten what the sun looked like. And then Spyro had an idea about how to fix their problem, which was to go to a place called Dragon Shores, a vacation spot they went to after they defeated Gnasty Gnorc. And with no objection from Sparx, Spyro exclaimed the last one there would be called a Gnorc, culminating in a race between the two. However, when they went through the portal, they weren't brought to Dragon Shores, but an entirely different land. Spyro shot out of the portal, spinning as he hit the ground, and as he opened his eyes, right in front of him would be a yellow fairy and 3 other creatures. However, first only 2 approached him. One would be a creature that Spyro couldn't quite identify, and the other would be a cheetah. Spyro then asked which way it was to go to the beach, still thinking that he was in fact in Dragon Shores. But as they kept on staring at Spyro, he asked if they had even seen a dragon before. The cheetah would then pretty much mock Spyro, mainly because he assumed that dragons would be much larger and rather more intimidating than someone like Spyro. However, this didn't stop Spyro from giving him a rather snarky response. Spyro asked the cheetah if he had an issue with his appearance, name-calling even. Probably not being too fond of being referred to as a pussycat, the cheetah seemed as if he was getting ready for some sort of comeback. But before anything could be said, a fireball streaked from behind them, flinging them all away from the portal that Spyro had come through. And from atop the high ground, 3 more creatures approached, with one holding a scepter and adorning robes, riding another, larger creature. As small creature set his eyes on the gathering, he noticed the dragon among them, and immediately exclaimed his hatred for dragons. As a result, he charged up another attack from the scepter, but before he could attack them once more, the yellow fairy zapped the small creature's hand, forcing him to let go of the scepter. And the fairy, once granting herself the perfect moment, took the scepter and attempted to fly it out of his reach. But as she flew away, one of these almost dinosaur-like creatures, named Crush, was ordered to end the fairy. The fairy, however, would avoid the swings of Crush, but would end up next to a larger creature known as Gulp. Gulp, in a turn of events, would grab the scepter with his mouth, forcing the fairy to let go, and leaving Gulp to eat the scepter instead of recapturing it, instead of getting it back with no damage, to the frustration of the smaller creature, who seemed to be in command. With the scepter lost, their assailant decided to run, leaving Spyro alone with the creatures that he had just met. Just after Ripto left, though, the creature that Spyro couldn't quite identify, which seemed to look more or less like a goat, came up to Spyro, and Spyro asked who that creature was that attacked them, to which he would learn that the small creature's name was in fact Ripto, an individual who had come from an unknown world, and like Spyro was stuck in Avalar. Only he used this opportunity to seize control of the land. He would also be given a guidebook, being told by one of the friendly creatures that it would help him start to understand the land he was in, Avalar. But before Spyro could ask any questions, this strange creature told Spyro to meet her in Summer Forest, leaving Spyro to travel through a land called Glimmer, and eventually make his way to Summer Forest, where he would both learn the Yellow Fairy's name, which would be Zoe, and he would be introduced to another resident of Avalar, a gem-loving bear named Moneybags, who would go on to bribe and teach Spyro new tricks throughout his adventure in Avalar. It would be after Spyro traveled through Glimmer that he met up with this unidentifiable creature. As they introduced themselves, of course Spyro would learn of her name, which would be Elora. But then he would go to ask if she was some sort of goat, to which he would quickly figure out wasn't the case, and that she was actually a fawn. And after their introduction, Spyro mentioned something about an object called a talisman, something given to him by the residents of Glimmer, the Gem Cutters. In response, Elora gasped, realizing what Spyro now stored in the guidebook she had given him. She would then go on to explain that there were 14 talismans in all of Avalar, all of which had magical properties, and that with all of them gathered together, they might have a chance to defeat Ripto. Just then, the cheetah popped out to the portal behind Spyro, with Elora asking the cheetah, whom she called Hunter, where he had been. Hunter would then fumble to find an excuse to tell Elora, laying on he had kinda gotten lost on his way to Summer Forest. Elora then gave Spyro the task of going through Avalar and hopefully collecting the other 13 talismans that resided in the many lands of Avalar. Spyro was rather taken off guard by the task that had been thrusted upon him. Hunter, however, had a sense of confusion in his voice. Elora would then explain to Spyro that, as it was, there was no way for Spyro to get back to Dragon's Shores, and that Ripto had effectively taken Summer Forest, which meant that the only way to solve the issue for both Elora and Spyro was to collect the talismans and hopefully stop Ripto. Hunter then claimed that he could collect the talismans himself, and that Spyro could just go defeat Ripto. However, the latter part was more said to mock the young dragon. He would then swiftly be reminded by Elora of his own running shoes, and that because he apparently couldn't even keep track of those, that it might not be the best idea to entrust him in collecting the talismans. And, left with no retort, Hunter stayed silent, while on the other hand, Spyro exclaimed that he would be ready to deal with Ripto, and get that vacation he and Sparx were planning. Both the Purple Dragon and Sparx would then begin to travel through Avalar, successfully collecting the talismans from each world they visited, and helping to solve the conflicts and troubles of each world along the way. It would also be told to Spyro that the orbs had been scattered around Avalar, and had to be collected as well, as they were the only way to unlock certain doors and portals, stopping Spyro from saving Avalar. Their adventure for the most part was going smoothly, with the occasional run-in with Moneybags, trying to bribe Spyro into giving him gems, and with whom Ripto had left to defend the castle, from which Ripto controlled Summer Forest, Crush. Spyro would then travel to below the castle, and a battle between Crush and Spyro would begin. Now, just because Crush was larger than Spyro does not mean that he was impervious to any of his attacks. In fact, Crush was vulnerable to Spyro's breath attacks, and so Spyro would use fire to anger Crush, causing him to slam the ground in rage. However, when Crush did this, rubble would fall upon him, whittling his strength away, However, this didn't mean that Spyro would go unchallenged. In fact, during the fight, Spyro would have to dodge both waves of blue fire and various fireballs. However, eventually, Spyro emerged victorious, as a result of Crush burying himself in stone. Ripto called out Crush's name, and then looked to the young dragon, furious. He then claimed that the young dragon might have been able to beat Crush, but Gulp would be sure to bring down Spyro. Spyro then told Ripto to bring it on, ready to take on whatever Ripto might be able to throw at him. And on top of all that, Spyro would comment on Ripto's rather short stature, using the term shorty. This would enrage Ripto even more, who called Gulp to his side, wanting to make sure that Spyro met a painful end. But instead of having to face Gulp as well, the ceiling started to collapse, causing Ripto to instead order Gulp to carry him to safety. And as Ripto and Gulp fled, Spyro watched the entrance they came through collapse, while the rest of the ceiling stayed rather sturdy. Just then, as Spyro called Ripto a wuss, the guidebook he had been given lit up with a light blue glow, floating before him, marking his first major victory in Avalar. Just as this was happening, banners on the castle of Summer Forest that Ripto had replaced reverted back to how they were before, displaying the banner of Avalar. Now a small thought here, but perhaps the banners are also magical in some way, and tied to the guidebook, or maybe it was just a coincidence. We may never know. Spyro would then continue his way through Avalar, moving from Summer Forest to a place called Autumn Plains. Here would actually go to various worlds that seemed to, at the time, be at war with each other. The Breeze Builders of Breeze Harbor and the Landblubber Slugs of Zephyr. Even along the way, he would run into more of Alor's species, with them being divided between two worlds. All the while, Moneybags once again would seemingly be ahead of Spyro, making him pay gems to pass certain parts of Avalar. On the other hand, Hunter had gone on his own path through Avalar, and would occasionally run into Spyro, having him collect orbs while on his own journey. When they met, Hunter, in order to help Spyro free Avalar from Ripto, gave him the orbs, but would strangely only do this after tasks were completed by the young dragon. However, despite this rather frustrating practice, the cheetah and the dragon would eventually start to develop a friendship. But despite what troubles Spyro encountered, he made his way into the depths of Autumn Plains Castle, where he would come face to face with Gulp and Ripto, the latter sitting comfortably on a throne. Gulp, unlike Crush, had ranged weapons placed on his back, and with Gulp also being impervious to flame and charge attacks, it meant that Spyro was going to be rather occupied. While Gulp would shoot green balls of electricity toward the purple dragon, while Gulp would try to body slam and shoot green balls of electricity toward the purple dragon, pterodactyls trained by Alor would help Spyro by dropping items, to hopefully give Spyro a chance to beat Gulp. Eventually, Gulp too would be defeated by the purple dragon, leaving only Ripto in Spyro's path. But a fight between them would have to wait, as a result caused by the battle between Spyro and Gulp caused Ripto and his throne to fall out of sight. The guidebook once more shined with a magical aura, and hovered in front of Spyro, while the banners of Autumn Plains reverted back to their original selves. It was only after the defeat of Gulp that Alor walked up behind Spyro, to his surprise. The Fawn mentioned that she had seen the castle freed as she stayed in Autumn Plains, and that apparently the different species of Avalar were starting to peacefully coexist once more. Perhaps this indicates that Ripto caused strife during his time in Avalar, like in the case of those of Zephyr and Breeze Harbor. It's never truly explained what Alora meant by this, but either way, Spyro was doing much for Avalar. And off that, as a thank you, Alora and Safari set up a chair and an umbrella for Spyro to relax in, as the Fawn knew that Spyro really just wanted to go on a vacation prior to him coming to Avalar. Before Spyro could take full advantage of a short break, however, he asked Alora if she would be joining him. But Alora told the young dragon that while she would like to join him, she would have to go to another world in Avalar, the final hub world known as Winter Tundra. As in this land resided the Super Portal, more than likely the only way for Spyro to get back to his home, as it was the only near complete portal and the only one that was strong enough to bring him back all the way to Dragon's Shores. However, as Alora told the dragon this information, he got into the chair he had been given, and started to drift off due to exhaustion most likely. But only a few seconds later, he sprang up and looked for Alora, who, in Spyro's quick nap, had left for Winter Tundra. Soon after, Spyro would get up and follow close behind, heading for Winter Tundra himself. When Spyro arrived, According to Elora, Ripto had survived the fall, and once again had captured the castle. But there was something else in his possession, something in which Spyro would need. While Ripto took the castle, he had also taken a power source for the super portal, leaving the only way back to the Dragon Realms out of commission. And so Spyro would travel to the multiple lands connected to Winter Tundra, collecting more orbs and talismans from wherever he went, working his way to finally confront Ripto. When the two did meet, Ripto would stand upon a platform floating on lava, with his new scepter he had created using the super portal's power crystal, making something that looked far more powerful than his last scepter. Ripto was trying to blast sheep, however, he would miss his shot entirely, and once Spyro had gotten Ripto's attention, the dragon, wanting to toy with Ripto, said he would make sure to stand still and let Ripto test his new scepter on him, to which Ripto simply replied that he liked that idea. And just like that, their battle had begun. Zoe immediately flew in front of Spyro, and informed him that Elora, Hunter, and the Professor were working on supplying the young dragon with what she called power-up energy, rather infused orbs or elemental infused orbs if you would prefer. These orbs would be delivered by Hunter, meanwhile Elora would give them to Hunter, and the Professor would work on making brand new power-up energy, giving Spyro abilities unseen by anyone before. These three orbs would be colored red, blue, and green. The red orbs would give Spyro the power of Super Flame. The other two, however, would be ones that Zoe referred to as never-before-seen power-ups. The blue one would give Spyro the same effect as if he was using a supercharged pad, while the green one would actually be poison. As Hunter dropped the modified orbs, both Spyro and Ripto would rush to collect them, collecting 3, then releasing their power on each other. As the fight went on, Spyro whittled down Ripto's strength, driving Ripto to use what magic he had to create a robotic version of what looked to be Gulp. Again, Spyro would bring down Ripto's new mount, and, becoming desperate, Ripto would use his scepter to create a robotic pterodactyl. This robotic version of Gulp would eventually be defeated by Spyro, exploding. However, orbs would come out of it, spreading out across the platform. Ripto, once again using magic, would turn this into a robotic pterodactyl, taking to the skies and leaving the platform he previously stood on cracking. However, Spyro also found one of these orbs, and used it to give himself the power of free flight and super flame. The two would dance around in an aerial battle for the fate of Avalar, with Spyro's fire attacks and Ripto's own magic attacks flying at each other in each direction. However, eventually, the balls of fire from Spyro would bring down the pterodactyl and, of course, Ripto, ending his tyrannical campaign against Avalar. As with the other times Spyro claimed victory, the guidebook hovered in the air, but this time, the book would hold the power crystal Ripto had stolen, more than likely implying that the new scepter had split or even melted away as it fell into the lava. With his victory over Ripto, the castle banners were restored to their normal selves, and with the guidebook collecting the power gem, not only had peace been brought to Avalar, but now Spyro had a way to get to Dragon Shores. Spyro would then meet up with Hunter, the Professor, Elora, and even Moneybags, who had just shown up. As a thanks for all he had done, Elora gave the dragon a kiss, to which people have speculated certain conclusions that perhaps Elora had taken a liking to Spyro. But somewhat contrary to the original series, there's nothing truly stated on this in Reignited. Elora guessed now that Spyro had to leave, Spyro responding by telling her that those in the Dragon Worlds would probably be missing him, and that after all he had done, he really wanted to just take that vacation in Dragon Shores. But before he went, Elora pointed out to Moneybags that he might have had something for Spyro, all the gems that Spyro had collected on his way through Avalar, but had to give to Moneybags due to the bear bribing Spyro into giving him the gems. But Moneybags, wanting to keep the gems, hid them from sight as best he could. However, this wouldn't stop Elora from telling Hunter to go collect the gems from the greedy bear. The cheetah would heed the directions of Elora, and would quickly brawl with Moneybags for the bag of gems, to which the cheetah would win. On behalf of Moneybags, Elora apologized to Spyro for taking so many of the gems, and said that he could actually take the gems back to the Dragon Realms. Spyro thanked her, and then told Sparx to go collect the gems. All the while, the Professor readied the super portal to let Spyro go to Dragon Shores. Just as the super portal had activated, Spyro brought up that the rest of them could come with him, taking a vacation themselves from all the commotion that they had been through recently. However, Elora told them that while Ripto was gone, the mess he had left in his wake was more than enough to keep them occupied for perhaps even weeks. But she did mention that if Spyro ever wanted to come back, he could use Dragon Shores to travel back to Avalar, using the capabilities of the Super Portal. Now, a little theory on how exactly the portal was able to be a two-way link. It could have been that there was already a portal in Dragon Shores, but using the Super Portal, it linked the two together, making for two-way travel between the Dragon Realms and Avalar. But with that, Spyro told Sparx to follow him, ready to take their much-needed vacation. As time passed, the Year of the Dragon would come about once again, marking both the 12th year of Spyro's hatch day and the Year of the Dragon festival. Eggs the dragons had given to the fairies to watch over were returned to the Dragon Realms, with the residents of the Dragon Realms being ready for an entirely new generation of dragons to be born. Once again, Spyro would find himself in Stone Hill, this time along with an assortment of eggs, Hunter, and various dragon elders from across the Artisan Realms. After a long celebration, each one of them found themselves resting upon the grass of the realms due to exhaustion. During their slumber, however, a young rabbit sorceress named Bianca and creatures called Rhinox came through a hole in the ground. They snuck around the slumbering dragons and grabbed the eggs, still yet to hatch. Through the holes, the Rhinox went, leaving Bianca as the last to leave Stone Hill. Before she left, she picked up one last egg and approached one of the holes, ready to take the egg wherever it led. However, Bianca would make a crucial mistake before leaving, this being accidentally stepping on Hunter's tail, causing him to wake up and cry out in pain. Spyro and the other dragons awoke, confused, but soon saw the rabbit with the egg in hand. The first one to act would be Hunter, who, in an attempt to stop Bianca, fell and planted his face straight into the ground. Spyro would then immediately follow after, shooting flames in Bianca's direction before preparing to charge toward her. Just as he was about to reach her, though, a dragon elder tried to catch her before she could escape through one of the holes, blocking the path and leaving the dragon elder stuck. For what I think could have been maybe even a couple minutes, Zoe came to Stone Hill, and when asked who the eggs were, she said that she and the other fairies had found some of them, but the eggs were too much for them to carry from the other side of the Dragon Worlds, then back to Artisans. This statement came as a surprise to Spyro, and shortly after, he would be told of a place known simply as the Forgotten Realms. Spyro was told to go through the holes, and to the Forgotten Realms. It was only him and Sparx that could actually fit through the holes, and somewhat Hunter. Ready for action, Hunter jumped straight into the hole, but got stuck as he entered it. However, he'd get help from a Dragon Elder, via getting smacked through the hole by the Dragon Elder's tail. The Elder then turned to Spyro, then told him that Spyro was the only hope for them to get their eggs back. And so, Spyro dove straight into the hole, and saw the Dragon Realm's desperate rescue. Once he had traveled through the hole, the young dragon would find himself in a place called Sunrise Spring, a hub world belonging to the land of the Forgotten Realms. Almost immediately, he'd start finding eggs, with the hatchlings bursting through the shells just as they were transported back to the Dragon Realms. However, soon after, Bianca would approach Spyro, mocking him, threatening him, even going as far as to say that the eggs they stole now belonged to them. She continued, saying that she had hidden the eggs in places that Spyro would never find, but given the fact that the eggs were right in front of the hole Spyro came through, the time she had to hide them was rather lacking, and her threat becoming rather empty. But even if he did manage to find the eggs, Bianca then warned Spyro that armies were ready and prepared to hunt down and retake the eggs if need be. She then would vanish in a flurry of magic, but despite this warning, Spyro would push forward, bringing back more eggs to the Dragon Realms, and even starting to enter some of the worlds residing in the Forgotten Realms. Surprisingly, after traveling through these worlds and collecting more eggs, Spyro ran into Moneybags, who apparently claimed that ever since Ripto was defeated, business for him in Avalar had been reduced to nothing. And so, he now found himself being paid by a sorceress, and now held a kangaroo called Sheila captive. And for her release, he asked Spyro to pay a small fee. As Spyro gave Moneybags the gems, he mentioned that his naivety and kind-heartedness might one day be the downfall of the young dragon. But despite his predictions, he gladly took the gems and released Sheila. Now when he did release the kangaroo, Moneybags believed that there would actually be no hard feelings, and that this was really just him doing his job, only to get kicked halfway across the realm as payback. Spyro then approached Sheila himself, the two introducing themselves, Almost immediately, Sheila recognized that Spyro was a dragon, something that she said hadn't been seen in the Forgotten Realms for millennia. Spyro was rather confused. He didn't know dragons had previously been in the Forgotten Realms, but from what Sheila said, the dragons used to rule over the lands, but just vanished from the Forgotten Realms one day. She also told Spyro that when the dragons vanished, things such as flying ships, singing forests, wishing stones, portals, and the very thing that powered them, magic, started to fizzle out. However, despite this, a few portals still remained, but even they were blinking out one by one. But before she continued, she mentioned that she had some damage control to do back in her own home. She mentioned that Spyro was welcome to come by anytime he liked, and then she stepped to the portal to take care of whatever mess lied ahead. Spyro then continued through the Forgotten Realms, eventually meeting up with Hunter, at times going to places in some of the worlds known as skate parks, and moving on through Sunrise Spring with him. Little did they know, however, that they were being watched by none other than Bianca. While the dragon stopped to look back to Hunter, the cheetah actually tripped over Spyro's tail, which was something that Bianca found a bit humorous. Of course, this alerted Spyro and Hunter to the rabbit being there, and, of course, the two parties faced each other, Spyro immediately mocking the young sorceress. Bianca retorted, reminding Spyro of what she had said before, telling them that the Forgotten Realms were not safe for what she called a little dragon and a pussycat. Spyro brushed off her warning, saying that he and Hunter could look out for themselves. But in an attempt to try and prove her point, Bianca threw a ball of magic toward the dragon and the cheetah. It would land right underneath Hunter, flinging him into the air. To make sure nothing bad had happened to Hunter, Spyro went to go check on the cheetah, and after seeing that he was alright, he turned to Bianca and chased her away. As she ran off, Spyro made a mocking remark. Meanwhile, Hunter got up and commented on Bianca, saying that when she was angry, she looked rather cute, something that Spyro rolled his eyes at. Little known to Spyro, Bianca and her master had sent a minion of theirs, a magically mutated Rhinoc named Buzz, to try and stop the dragon's progress. It would actually be told to Spyro through Sheila that Buzz was sent by someone named the Sorceress, who of course we would know as Bianca's master. However, with relative ease, at least for the most part, Spyro was able to defeat Buzz and go on to the next subworld, Midday Gardens. Here, Spyro would enter and encounter Bianca once again, and with the defeat of Buzz, Bianca's tone was more serious, the rabbit trying to sound a bit more threatening than she had before. She then told the young dragon that while he had defeated Buzz, she said that the dragon had no idea of what waited for them ahead, and so she told Spyro that he and Hunter would be better taking what they had and running back to the Dragon Realms. But unlike the last few encounters, she said something before she disappeared, something more like a warning, saying that she was telling them to run for their own good. Again, Spyro ignored her warnings, and, much like Sunrise Spring, Spyro started to travel to the worlds connected to the Midnight Gardens, finding more eggs hidden by the Rhinocs and Bianca. But as the dragon traveled, he not only found more eggs, but another creature held captive by Moneybags. Like the last time, Moneybags asked Spyro to pay him for the creature's release, as the sorceress saw him as a threat to her plot. Once Spyro had given Moneybags the gems, the captive, a bird wearing military attire, flew towards Spyro. He presented his rank, name, and designation, saying that he was awaiting orders, leaving Spyro with the information that the individual standing before him was Sergeant Bird. Spyro of course said that the sergeant might have to find his commanding officer to get his orders. He then noticed a strange pack on Sergeant Bird's back, and when Spyro asked about it, the sergeant responded, telling the dragon that they were called DBX-9 rocket launchers, equipment that was state-of-the-art, as he said. It was then that he asked the bird why he didn't just use the rocket launchers to escape, causing Sergeant Bird to stammer as he came up with a response. But the sergeant's reasoning was that first, he was on limited ammo, and he wanted to use the ammo that he had once he had been presented the right chance to use them on his captor, Moneybags. After he took his rather swift revenge on the bear, Sergeant Bird inquired to know where Spyro was actually from, as the last he had heard of the dragons, apparently they had gone extinct. Or of course, Spyro said that was slightly exaggerated. Something Spyro added on, however, is an assumption I'm going to guess, that being that the dragons wanted some peace and quiet. Now, at this point in the story, Spyro, having not even known of the Forgotten Realms beforehand, shouldn't know why the dragons left, or why they disappeared from the Dragon Realms. So in any case, this is more likely an assumption made before or just as he met Sergeant Byrd, as he himself had only heard that the dragons randomly disappeared from the Forgotten Realms. He then warned Spyro that if it was peace and quiet the dragons wanted, then he should try to avoid his homeworld, as just like the rest of the Forgotten Realms, the Rhinox had invaded his home and held it for the sorceress. And without further delay and a quick goodbye, Sergeant Byrd set off to his home to drive out the Rhinox. And so Spyro set off to the different worlds, cleansing them with the Rhinox presence, facing off against both typical enemies and those of what can be described as a higher ranking within the sorceress's army. Eventually though, he and Hunter would meet up, running into Bianca once more. Spyro, Hunter, and Sparks watched as Bianca experimented with magic, using it to transform what they first saw as a plant with teeth. She would flip through the pages of the spellbook given to her by the sorceress, and chant one of the spells inscribed within, shooting the magic summoned by her words toward the plant with her wand, transforming it into a rather large apple, something she seemed to be rather frustrated over. She would try again, and this time she would turn the apple into a rabbit. With all the mistakes Bianca was making, Spyro and Hunter couldn't help but laugh. But with one more flip of the page, the young sorceress casted one more spell, turning the rabbit into a monster. Whether this was her intent or not, the creature immediately turned hostile and ran itself into her, flinging Bianca through the air and onto the ground. Hunter then suggested that they should help out, to which Spyro reminded him of their encounter with her in Sunrise Spring. But Hunter would say that when she was casting the magic then, it was Spyro she was aiming after, not him. In a turn of events, the creature, which was more than likely made to stop Spyro and Hunter, engulfed Bianca, and the spellbook she used to create the beast flew through the air, landing in front of Spyro, Hunter, and Sparks. Hunter had had enough, and took the rescue of Bianca. A fight would ensue between Hunter and the mutated rabbit, Spyro watching in the distance. Eventually, Hunter was able to fling himself through the air, kicking the rabbit in the stomach, throwing Bianca back into the open. However, Hunter now left himself in a vulnerable position, and if it wasn't for Bianca using her magic to turn the mutated creature back into a rabbit, Hunter would have ended up in the exact same position that Bianca was in seconds prior. But the fate of Hunter would be different. Instead of being swallowed whole, he would just be left annoyed by the rabbits hopping on his head. Until he threw it off, that is. Bianca then turned to Hunter, thanking him for freeing her. But just as Hunter replied, Spyro walked over and explained that it was a good thing that Hunter was there to help. This comment, or rather the presence of Spyro, seemed to snap Bianca back into being hostile, at least toward the purple dragon. Prior to claiming that she could take care of herself, she readied to send a blast of magic towards Spyro. However, due to a lack of magic, all she could do was conjure a butterfly, to which Sparks happily ate. Spyro, once realizing that Bianca was out of magic, commented on her misfortune, and prepared to take advantage of it fully, getting ready to use his own magic against the would-be sorceress. Seeing that she was outmatched, Bianca warned Spyro that she'd deal with him later, and retreated deeper into the Forgotten Realms, to the dismay of Hunter. Spyro would go deeper into the Forgotten Realms himself, continuing to return more of the dragon eggs and helping the residents of the Forgotten Realms along the way. He would once again run into a Rhinoc mutated by the sorceress, one by the name of Spike. Spyro would now find himself fighting an enemy that not only just attacked him directly, but also used ranged attacks, something similar to Gulp or even Ripto. But he would not be alone in this fight. Sergeant Byrd would be there to assist in taking down Spike, just as Hunter did in Avalar, or even Sheila did with Buzz. Sergeant Byrd would drop orbs, some containing certain powers, some being able to be flung towards Spike as Spyro rammed into them, which exploded on impact. Eventually, Spyro would defeat Spike, and move on to Evening Lake, where he'd run into Bianca again. But this time, her tone with the young dragon would be even more serious, her warning more stern, as if something was going on behind the scenes. When she left, Spyro would of course continue his way, traveling through the various worlds, meeting up with Hunter in mock-up skate parks Hunter had found, and run into Moneybags, holding yet another creature captive, a Yeti named Bentley. Of course, Spyro used what gems he had to free Bentley, and after he did so, Bentley would say that, through his rather robust vocabulary, he was thankful, while Spyro said in shorter terms that it was no problem. Like the rest, Bentley took his chance to get back at Moneybags, using this club made out of ice to bash the bear. He turned to Spyro after a few hits, and asked if he should just do it once more. To which Spyro said, "At least." After Moneybags was clobbered once more, Bentley mentioned that it would be his honor if Spyro were to visit his homeworld, and would like Sheila, Hunter, and Sergeant Bird help Spyro on his adventure and quest to find the dragon eggs, despite the fact that he might not know what Spyro is trying to find. Now, at a certain point, Hunter actually went missing, leaving Spyro to find the eggs himself. Spyro, as he made his way to the next world after Eating Lake, would find himself fighting a creation of the sorceress once more. This one, however, being able to fly, and almost having a nightmarish appearance. This one would be named Scorch. Here, Bentley would assist the purple dragon, giving him red and green projectiles to throw at the waves of enemies that rushed toward him. And of course, the monster before him. Once Scorch was defeated, Bianca would meet Spyro again, and now said that she wanted to help him fight the sorceress. To help fill the void of trust Spyro would have for her, to explain a way to reach the sorceress, with the eventual idea of course being to defeat her. However, she told the dragon that to get to her, they would need to go through a secret portal in Midnight Mountain and activate it, which would require a massive amount of magic, something that Bianca said she could get if Spyro were to collect enough eggs. And like before, she disappeared, telling Spyro she would return when Spyro had found enough eggs. With this new and rather interesting alliance, Spyro set out once more to reclaim the eggs, and made his way to the sorceress. While Spyro was going through the Forgotten Realms, he would find that Hunter had returned, and as we would later learn, he fell into a trap made for him and Spyro, but was released by Bianca after she had learned the sorceress' plan for the eggs, which was to take the hatchlings from within and take their wings, making an immortality spell with them, of course after the hatchlings had been slaughtered by the sorceress. It would also be during Hunter's captivity that we would learn of what happened to the dragons in the Forgotten Realms, something that, from what can be observed, Spyro never truly learns until much later. The dragons, 1,000 years prior, were actually residents of the Forgotten Realms, with the Forgotten Realms actually being their original home. However, there was a disagreement of sorts between them and the sorceress, which resulted in the dragons being banished from their home by the sorceress herself. At first, this seemed to have no real effect on the land outside of the shift in the power balance, but the sorceress and her apprentice Bianca would soon feel the effects of the banishment. As with the dragons gone, everything that ran on magic, and magic itself, started to drain from the Forgotten Realms, shortly affecting the sorceress, and eventually when Bianca came around, her chances of becoming a sorceress. All until Spyro and the eggs had come to the Forgotten Realms. In fact, fixing this problem was what the sorceress said was her reasoning behind taking the eggs at first, before presenting her true plot, which was to make an immortality spell. Like before, Spyro ran into Moneybags, holding captive yet another creature that the sorceress called a menace. However, Moneybags sarcastically described this creature as more an action figure with a laser gun more than anything, and joked about there maybe one day being Spyro action figures. Took little time to use his weapon, and made Moneybags dance, as it were, by shooting at the ground right next to his feet. After which, he introduced himself to Spyro. However, as he got to describing how his homeworld was infested by Rhinox, he barely let the dragon speak, and almost as quick as he said his introduction, he went back to his home to clear out the sorceress's army from his world. Quickly, Spyro would gather the eggs necessary to help Bianca activate the portal, and like she said before, she would use the magic generated by the eggs to open the portal, allowing Spyro to fight and defeat the sorceress. Once he entered, Spyro would meet Agent 9, who was willing to help him fight, supplying him with weapons to fight the sorceress with. The arena would be a platform, a moat of lava surrounding it. During the battle, Agent 9 shot down equipment that was hung by balloons overhead, dropping tanks, cannons, and even hovercraft to help Spyro. Slowly but surely, and while dodging fire from the sorceress, who actually used his staff with the dragon egg powering it, Spyro dwindled down the sorceress, until finally he knocked the sorceress into the surrounding lava. Just as she sunk into the molten rock though, the egg on her staff flew onto the platform, right next to Spyro, allowing Spyro to return this egg and the hatchling inside to the Dragon Realms. After this, Spyro returned to the Dragon Realms, and would be interviewed about his victory in the Forgotten Realms. We would soon realize that Bentley had also come from the Forgotten Realms and was interviewing Spyro, talking about how he had reclaimed the eggs and brought freedom to the Forgotten Realms. The Yeti then asked Spyro if he was going to take a vacation in Dragon's Shores. Spyro responded only saying that Bentley was a real comedian, because there was actually much more to do. He then mentioned the reasons, mainly being the fact that there were more eggs yet to be found, and Hunter had gone missing again. Curious, Spyro asked Bentley if he knew where Hunter might have gone, to which he was given a rather half-baked response. Spyro then went back to the Forgotten Realms, where he met up with the Professor and Laura in Agent 9's world. Here, the Professor explained that he actually meant to go to the Dragon Worlds, using an old book to get the coordinates. But this book, as Spyro would note, was a millennium out of date. The Professor then realizing that's probably why he was able to acquire the book for such a low price. Laura then asked, since Spyro was done saving the world, at least as she put it, the Fawn asked if Spyro would be visiting Avalar, to which the dragon responded by saying the same thing he told Bentley, that he had to find the eggs and figure out where Hunter might have gone. Agent 9 then started to butt into the conversation, but before he could say anything more, the Professor mentioned something about Rhinox hiding in distant bushes, riling up Agent 9 and drawing his attention away from Spyro and into the distance. However, before he was cut off, Agent 9 mentioned something about Hunter sneaking off with someone, making Spyro's curiosity rise. The Professor then mentioned, after Agent 9 had left, that Hunter was in good hands, but before he could say anything else, Laura kicked him in the back, and the Professor then said he meant to say that he would probably turn up soon. Laura then told Spyro, before she returned to Avalar, to visit her soon, with a rather cheery voice when seen in Reignited. Both Spyro and Laura waved goodbye, and the dragon went off to meet with Sheila, back in her homeworld. When he met up with Sheila, she was talking to a few mountain goats about not messing with the moose that resided in the world. And when Spyro walked up, he greeted her and got to his point, that being that he was still looking for Hunter. Sheila then became very sarcastic and told Spyro through very clear terms that Hunter made her promise not to tell anyone where he and someone who was with him had gone. It wouldn't take long for Spyro to realize who she meant Hunter was with, a realization that Spyro wished not to be. He then traveled to Fireworks Factory with Sparks, another place in the Forgotten Realms, and what he speculated came to be reality. On one of the archways, lit by a moon and fireworks launched by Sergeant Bird's rocket launchers, were Hunter and Bianca, embracing each other and sharing their newfound romantic affection. This disgusted Spyro, who stated that yet another warrior had fallen to the plague of love. As Spyro and Sparks watched, however, Laura walked up behind the dragon and insisted that they should just enjoy the fireworks show, sitting down as color filled the sky. After, of course, as Spyro said earlier, he had to travel through the Forgotten Realms and find the rest of the eggs. And eventually, it would come down to only a handful of eggs left. Directly after this, Spyro would meet up with Moneybags in Midnight Mountain, and have a rather quick talk, with Moneybags saying that he had both found a dragon egg, and he could probably make a fortune with it back in Avalar, only to have Spyro repeatedly charge into his back, causing him both to lose all the gems he had made Spyro pay in the Forgotten Realms, and his interest in selling the egg. After this, the dragon would enter the sorceress's hidden world, in which Spyro would meet with Bianca once again, and clear the challenges presented in each section of her hideout. But unknown to Spyro and the rest at first, the sorceress had survived her first defeat by the dragon, with only Bianca just learning of this moments before Spyro. The rabbit would directly help the dragon in the fight, giving him equipment much like what he had in his first fight with the sorceress. In fact, Bianca would actually give Spyro her own personal flying saucer. They'd once again battle out in a circular arena, but this one would actually have no platform, only a deadly purple liquid engulfing the ground below. And much like the initial confrontation, Spyro would use what was given to him, Bianca's hovercraft, to take down the sorceress' own hovercraft. And, as was with the last confrontation between Spyro and the sorceress, the dragon would take down the sorceress, leaving her to sink into the depths of the purple lake. And as she did, one last egg would appear before Spyro, one harboring two dragons instead of one. And after this, the eggs were finally all gathered together in the Dragon Realms, and Spyro would have been successful in accomplishing his task in rescuing all the dragon eggs. Now this is only the original Year of the Dragon, but in the shadows, Ripto and Gnasty are planning to deal with what they call the Spyro problem. Now this would later come to fruition, kind of, but that's only in games following the original trilogy, not the Reignited Trilogy, as the Reignited Trilogy is yet to have a sequel. It doesn't include this slide in the game. Another thing to know is that at the end of Year of the Dragon as well, something is mentioned about Spyro missing its chance with Laura, in a romantic kind of way, as we can see from the amusement park ride in Dragon Shores, the Tunnel of Love. It's pretty apparent that Spyro for the most part doesn't seem to care, or rather finds the concept of love or relationship to be rather off-putting to say the least. Which is why in the original trilogy this would have been said about Spyro and Elora. Now, Elora is more flirtatious and playful in Reignited than she was in the originals, and this slide about Spyro missing its chance isn't there. But Spyro still holds the same opinion on love than he did in the originals, so the door is left open per se, unlike the original games. However, I don't think it means that it will lead to anything, as Spyro is more focused on adventure, and his opinion on a romantic relationship is, well, not that great, as we can see when it comes to Hunter and Bianca. Though, either way, we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, that's going to be it for me for now. As you can see, this video is already pretty long, so I didn't necessarily want to make it any longer than it had to be. Plus, a vote on Twitter said that people would rather have it actually be separate from the post-Insomniac games. So, here we are. Speaking of my Twitter, if you want to stay updated on video progress, or even smaller theories that might not make it into a video, you can go follow me on Twitter. The link will be down in the description below. Also, new to Lore of the Dragon, but I actually have a Discord server. The link to that will also be down in the description. Hope to see you there. But if you just want to stick around the channel and watch videos as they come out, that's fine by me. But anyway, that's going to be it. Hope to see you all in the next lore video. Stay safe, historians.